everybody, face to face on race. I'm with Black. We're together again. This is the sixth time we've come together, or at least for the sixth episode. And we've been enjoying every single one. That's grueling. We're finding it tough. Maybe you're finding it tough. At the outset, I want to say what we always say. We don't think we're the last word on anything. The idea is to get conversations going. We are zealous for the truth. We want to pursue the truth in Christ, and that's what this exercise is all about. It's about doing that, and doing it in a way that fosters conversation and spurs other conversations along. So this week, what are we considering? We're considering the doctrine of power versus the doctrine of sin, and the one versus the many. Now that may sound complicated, so let me do a little bit of clarification, hopefully. Let me just start by describing what I think the journey has been for, at least in Western culture, and with its massive influence on other cultures. Let's start with the doctrine of power. What are we talking about, and how it relates to one versus many? So here, I think, is the thumbnail sketch. We start at the beginning of modernity. So we're talking about Descartes, French philosopher, and he's widely recognized as kind of being seminal in modern thinking. And what he did was he began what is called the subjective turn. In other words, truth before that was understood to be something objective, something out there, something we can discover. What Descartes did, and he didn't actually do this, he didn't achieve this on his own. This is hundreds of years and movements by degree, and each thinker building on the previous one. But he started the turn to locate truth within ourselves. So the locus of truth, he started the shift in the locus of truth from objective to subjective. So we start to search within ourselves for the truth. When I fast forward hundreds of years, you get to postmodernism, which we probably postmodernism. They're still deciding on the name, but by the time you get to postmodernism, people are radically skeptical about the idea of objective. No one believes it, right? There are no what they call meta narratives anymore. There's only subjective truth. There's only your truth and my truth. We just can't access things objectively. We are too subjective by nature, and so the idea of objective truth is redundant. We can't access it. We have to go inward. We have to define truth for ourselves. That's what the brave and courageous person will do. They'll just define it for themselves. The problem with that is, what happens when Black's truth collides with Royden's truth? So there's a collision. Now remember, we've done away with the idea of truth objectively, which means we've done away with the idea of right and wrong, because that is saying there's something that transcends us. And that's exactly what you can't say in a skeptical framework. So there's only your truth and my truth. So how do we arbitrate? How do we decide? Well, there's only one way. You get a knob, Kerry, and you beat me over the head with it, and you win.
Sure.
Might is right? So in a fight for truth, Black wins. He's stronger, and he prevails, and that is the truth, right?
That's definitely the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we don't believe in truth. I'm a skeptic on that last story, at least. So that's the only arbitrator we have. So what happens is power replaces truth. It's the only way we can relate to each other, because you have yours and I have mine. So the only way we relate to each other is who's stronger, who's going to prevail in this arm wrestle of truths. Who's going to prevail? So power becomes the currency by which we relate to each other. And then here's where group comes in. because we can't deny the fact. So by the way, to be a postmodern skeptic is to be inconsistent. It's impossible to live out this ideal, because the moment you do anything, you are affirming truth. But be that as it may, we're social animals. So what we do is, where there's an overlap of truth, we gather together and we form our little tribes. And so we form groups, and we are then defined by the prevailing truth in that group. And then the question is, well, how do the groups relate? Well, there is only one way. If they disagree on what is true, there's only one way, and that's power. And so there is just no other way to interact as human beings. So whether you're talking about male and female, immediately you've got two groups. How do they relate? They relate. It's a power struggle. Whether you're talking about black and white, how do they relate? It's a power struggle. You multiply the tribes. There's an infinite universe of the number of tribes. But the only way that we can relate to each other is by a truth that defines us, truth with a small t, basically a social contract between this group. This is who we are, and this is how we see the world. This is how the world is. We're in our tribe. That tribe over there, they disagree with us, and either they have the power and we need to take it, or we have the power and we need to keep them down. And that's the only way we can relate. There is no other way, because there is no other truth. There's no coming together and discussing, look, who's right here? Because that category doesn't exist. It's only who wins here. That's the question. That's the only question. And so that's kind of where the culture's at, as far as I can discern. It's that framework. So that's very abstract and philosophical, but I think what we've discovered in our chats, kind of off air, is that it plays out in the lives of flesh and blood human beings, and that you've got a very real story to share about living inside of that framework. So let me give you the conch, man, and you run with it and share. Perhaps you want to build on some of the things I've said, but otherwise share your story and your lived experience from inside that kind of framework.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that, bro. And I think obviously my story is it has to do with race. Again, it's face to face on race, and so I think what the framework that you've just described and given us now at least helps my story to have a context to fit in, and for us at least to have a framework of how we can interpret it and make sense of it. But for me, I think it particularly obviously played within my racial group, so among Black people. And so if what you described is the situation, that we obviously get into our group because we disagree with white people and what white people would stand for, whatever the thing is, or maybe we disagree because obviously there's racism, and the racism is felt from coming from white people towards Black people, and so we say we want to get together and fight against this enemy called racism, and I think for me, probably 2013. So when Black Lives Matter came up 2013, the conversation then really became about racism, and I think I shared in two episodes ago, just how my passion for speaking in race relation conversations was because of my love for Black people, and so that's what drove me in. So if we're gonna speak about race, I'm in, because I'm here to fight for the truth that Black people are made in God's image and they're worthy, and I want them to know that at all times. And so I came into those conversations with that drive, with that push, I'm fighting for that. So I jump in, and then obviously then what happens, because of group dynamics, I gravitate towards Black people. But then I soon realized that there's not even soon, but after a while, I realized that there's probably things that I don't fully agree with when it comes to the dominant narrative that Black people would hold on to. And so I think what started slowly happening is, one, I think there's 4 things I want to speak about just in explaining my own story and how it relates to group dynamics and the power struggle. But the first thing that I think happened is my voice got drowned, so my love for Black people got drowned, because that's what I wanted to speak about. That's what I came in for, that's what I came advocating for and fighting for. But that got drowned because the dominant narrative is racism. We're fighting against racism, So I have to kind of then think, okay, how do I speak about the fact that Black people need to be taken care of, loved? They need to realize that they're made in God's image. Feels like there's no time for that. We have to speak about the enemy the whole time. We have to speak about how white people are racist, how white people are oppressing us, how white people are out to get us, etc., etc. And so I'm like, that's what I was focusing on. So my voice got drowned in the group, and I think then my own individuality and what I'm passionate about got swallowed as well, with all of that. And so I think that's the one thing I saw and experienced, that my voice just got swallowed up, and what I care for as an individual was not the important thing, wasn't considered. But then secondly, I think what started happening is I realized I was becoming disingenuous to my own reality, my own lived experience, my own lived reality, And again, interpreting that using objective truth. So how my life panned out, in God's providence and how God was working in my life before I was even a Christian, and after being a Christian as well. God is the one who's been working. God is the one that has been drawing me to Himself. So I think falling into the group narrative, I just became disingenuous to my own reality, and a number of things that I can cite. So if I had to believe the narrative that Black people are victims, so all Black people, and that's the thing. So we don't differentiate, and say, shucks, Sbusiso goes to work and has an oppressive boss, and we can talk about that and break that down and see how we can come up with solutions to help Sbusiso. But then we take Sbusiso's incident and we basically make that a blanket statement for all Black people. And so we're saying, well, we see how this racism is playing out here, and therefore all Black people are experiencing racism or oppression. And so if you're a Black person, like in my instance, where I was like, well, that's not happening where I'm at, Again, not to say it's not happening, therefore I don't relate with Sbusiso. I feel your pain. From one human to another, from one Black person to another, I feel your pain. But I have to be honest to my own reality, and I can't then just wear the label of feeling like a victim, or wear the label of oppression, if that's not really happening to me, Because then I think what started happening is I have to then speak of racism or oppression at a very abstract level, because I want to fit with the group, and I want the group to know that I'm with them. We have the same struggle. We soldiers together, But then I start speaking about it at a very abstract level, and then I have to try and find some form of oppression where I'm at, and I think I became very disingenuous to my own reality. And then just even looking at how I was raised, and I think I shared this with you off air, that my own father came from a very poor family. Financially, they were not well off at all, but he worked hard, to get an education. He worked hard to get the job he got. He worked hard to move up the ladder of the company that he was in. He really worked hard to take me to historically all white schools. He worked hard to give us the opportunities that I got in my life. So it would be disingenuous of me to say, like I personally felt the historical effects of apartheid in my family. It would be disingenuous. My father worked. He really worked. He didn't say at any point to me, even when we had our first race conversation, there was never a point where he said, there's white people who are keeping me down and oppressing me at all. So I started realizing there's a lot of things in my life that I've seen, and whether I'll be considered privileged economically compared to other Black people, that might be the case as well. And I have to be honest to that reality, So I think it's unfair of me. I have cousins who are not as well off as I am right now. It will be unfair of me, and I think I wouldn't really appreciate where they at if I just throw a blanket statement on all of us, as though I don't live where I live, as though I don't have the opportunities I have, So I would really be downplaying how God has really worked in my life, but also I think I would be insulting them, them knowing that, well, you live where you live, you have the opportunities that you have rather, and then you're going to turn around and say that you're struggling in the same way that we struggle, So again, I'm not saying that there isn't any oppression. There is, in terms of racism. There are people who are being racist towards Black people. But I think I have to be honest to myself. And the thing is, when I started realizing that, or started speaking about this, I realized that there's a lot of other Black people who have a similar experience to me. And which leads me to the third thing, where they started saying to me when I engaged with them that it felt like for our voices to be legitimate in the conversation about race, I had to accept this narrative of victimhood. I had to accept the narrative of oppression, because if I don't, then it delegitimizes my voice. So I'm cast out of the conversations. I don't belong to the group if I do not ascribe some form of oppression to my life. And so it felt like, here's a table, we've invited all Black people, but you, and I'll say this because I've been called that name, you're a coconut, you don't belong in this table, you look like us, but you're clearly white inside from how you speak and some of the experiences that you had. So you're really your opinion is not valued on this table, and again, it speaks to what you were saying earlier on, So if we do away with objective truth and we just fighting for subjective truth, then the truth of the group disagrees with my reality, or my reality disagrees with the truth of the group at that moment. So we cast out. I spoke to a young Black lady. She's born probably 96, 97. So she's considered a born free. So she was having a conversation with her mother, and she was saying to her mother, they're talking about race. And she told her mother that she feels oppressed. And her mother basically told her, you're talking rubbish. Like, I don't know what oppression you're talking about. I was chased by dogs. I went to prison. Some of my friends and family members were killed. So that you can have the opportunities that you have today. I don't know what oppression you're talking about. Mm. And so at that point, she confessed to me that she had the argument with her mother, because if her mother is proven to be right, that you're not oppressed, then she doesn't have a say in the conversation. Then she's cast out. So she had to fight her mother to convince herself that, no, I have a right to speak about racism or race relations, or speak about my Blackness, if I can prove that I'm oppressed. But if I can't prove that, if my reality says otherwise. If my reality is you're the first black kid in your entire family to go to an all-white school, at least historically all-white school. You're the first black kid to get a degree in your family. You're the first black kid, to get the job that you have and the opportunities that you have. If that's your reality, it's and at no point can you say I had white people who were intentionally working their lives off to keep me oppressed and to come against me, and you don't have that experience, then you can't be part of this group. We cannot consider you. It's as though you less of a black person. And that's the thing that I just could not accept. I could not accept that my blackness is only valued because of either pain, anger, scars, oppression, anything like that. Where I'm like, yes, we have scars, but that's not the sum total of our existence. That's not the sum total of who God made us to be. Even when we just honest with each other and we sit together as black people, we can see just how awesome people are, individuals are, black people, for various things. You know what I mean? For the gifts they have, the talents they have, the way they think. We can see all the great things that God has given us as black people. So I do not believe that the only thing that qualifies me to be black or to speak about my blackness is pain, is oppression, is victimhood, is some connection to slavery. I think that's a very small view of the greatness that God has given us as black people, and I think that greatness is obviously his image in us, and how that expresses itself uniquely in the black experience. So I was pained by the fact that your voice is not legitimate at all. And then I think the last thing, just thinking about the principle of Ubuntu and the saying that goes umuntu umuntu ngabantu, so the individual is because of the whole. And I think most of the time the argument is on the emphasis of the whole. So when somebody would bring that statement, it would seem counter to what I even just highlighted to us right now. Like it's all about the group, it's all about the community, it's all about the family. But that statement on its opening word is umuntu. So I see the individual, and therefore I am saying all that the individual brings. I acknowledge that it's made obviously by the group, but there's a sense in which the individual is standing on his own or on her own, and we see you and we acknowledge you as an individual, but we also saying that it's impossible that you can be all that you are right now just because you appeared out of nowhere. You have to have a family, you have to have friends, you have to have a group, you have to have a thing, but we're not trumping. That statement doesn't trump the individual. And I think we've kind of made the emphasis so much on the group that we've forgotten that statement actually says that I am because of the umuntu muntu. So the person is a person. That's what the statement is saying, directly translated. The person is a person because of other people, but we acknowledge the individuality there. And the person's personhood, and so even when I started thinking about that even if we just think about African traditional culture and that principle and what it means and how it's governed African people for years, it wouldn't trump the individual. It would say let's respect the individual's experience. And see then how the individual experience fits into the group and vice versa, So we acknowledge that the group is made of individuals, and the group cannot be if there aren't any individuals. But we also saying at the same time the individual cannot be if the group is not there. So these two things I don't think are mutually exclusive. I think they hold each other. But what we've seen in the dominant narrative right now, in this present moment in our culture, is that the group trumps the individual. So we do away with your individual responsibility. We do away with your individual expression, and we do away with just your personhood, so that you can blend in with everyone else. And if you don't agree with what the dominant narrative of the group is, then you're not even a person at all. You're an enemy. You need to leave. You're not part of the squad. And I think that's not accurate with all our experiences and realities. So for me, I saw it play out like that. One, it drowns my voice, and other people could attest to that as well. Secondly, it just makes my own experience, makes me disingenuous to my own experience and reality, and delegitimizes my voice. At least that's what the pushback was. And then I think it really downplays the principle of Ubuntu. So we can hold both. I don't think that, and holding both, by the way, which we'll get to at the end, but I'll say it here. It brings a richness to the solution of racism. But if we're just saying that, all Black people need to accept that they need to feel like victims. All Black people need to feel like they're being oppressed. All Black people need to feel like we all need to come together and just fight this one enemy and this one way to do it. I'm uniquely designed, Spusiso is uniquely designed. Mandla is uniquely designed. And if I trump all those uniqueness, then we're going to have a very myopic solution, But if we let all those experiences breathe, and come to the table and bring the richness that their histories and own experiences have cultivated in them, I'm like, sheesh, we could have a way bigger solution and a more richer way to approach this, and bring redemption, and justice that we're crying for. So that's been my experience. I know I'd asked you, because my other thing is, when it obviously comes to the Western culture, we've just preached, don't be like the Westerners. They're all individualistic and they all go into their small corners. But yeah, so I wanted to know from you as a white person, how has that somehow played out in your life, or maybe there's just reflections in light of what you had shared and what I just shared now. So. So on a personal level.
No, I mean, so I think to a certain extent it plays out in white. The inverse plays out in white culture as well. Where Black people are a certain way, right? But then what do you do? So all Black people are like Julius Malema, or Black people are like Thuli Madonsela. But then what do you do when you encounter the other one? Right. So immediately the typecast is blown to bits. And this is the thing. This is what you say. We have to somehow suppress that experience. So a Black person who treats me with nothing but love and grace and kindness and forgiveness, I must cast that to one side, because all Black people are angry and want to take my land. Because that's the whatever. That's the stereotype. But what do I do with this one who wants nothing to do? Who wants to do nothing but love me and forgive me and be kind to me and tell me when I'm out of line, love me enough to tell me when I'm wrong. What do I do with that one? Because they don't fit the typecast. So when I'm at the braai and oaks are going off about Black people are this or Black people are that, what must I suppress that in group solidarity? Because that's not my in my closet, in my dark closet, I've got these experiences that speak otherwise. But my group identity won't allow for that, right? I can't tell anyone about this person who's fallen over themselves to actually accept me when I was racist to them. But they're so committed to me that they are willing to look past that, and still pursue some sort of relationship. What do I do with that person? I've got to lock them away because the group narrative won't allow. So I think it's so pernicious on both sides, man. It's really unhelpful. at least in my experience of whiteness and group narrative. And just to the thing on individuality and the individual and the group, I mean, I think certainly that even that, so here's an example of where group narrative is not helpful, because even that individual thing is no longer a white thing. It's for anybody who's been influenced by Western culture. And we all have, because we've all got Netflix. So the thing is, even that starts to, our group narrative starts to crack at that point, because that's supposed to be reserved for white people. Now, listen, we've got a major problem in our culture on that. There's absolutely no doubt. And I've lived that. I've lived a desire to just be on my island with people I've allowed in, and we're going to hold on to our rock, and anybody else is just a kind of an obstacle in the pursuit of happiness, right? So I know that's a very real problem. But again, we've got lived experiences that are challenging these group narratives that we're supposed to defend, right? Because we're in a struggle for power. So we've got to defend our turf. We've got to defend our story. I'm supposed to defend that the idea that is fine, But now, what happens when you actually do have some black people who've swallowed that thing? They've swallowed the Netflix whole, and they are now starting to live lives that are in total defiance of Ubuntu. And it's a middle class problem, right? So it doesn't discriminate. So we're seeing more and more, and it's a tragedy, I think, because I think that is something that culturally you guys have got so much to give to us in that area, but we're seeing this influence, and it doesn't fit the group narrative anymore, Anyway, those are just some reflections on that. I think the place to go next, Black, and I'll kick us off and then help me, is to start thinking about the way the Bible thinks about these same issues. So let's start with power. How does the Bible treat that category, and how does it supplement that category or help us to move past a narrow view on power? So I think there's certainly power in the Bible, right? God Almighty. It's a statement of power. He is power in his essence. He's pure power. But so it's not as though power in and of itself is corrupt. What is it? There's something behind power that takes it and perverts it and uses it for pernicious ends. And that's something, we have a biblical category for that. That something is sin. That something is the attempt to capture and channel power for me, for my ends, for myself, rather than for the love of God and the love of others. So we've taken something that is a gift from God, because he made us. What did he make us for? When we talk about the image, almost the thing that comes immediately after that, the kind of the context for image of God is dominion. Dominion is a license to bear power for God's glory. But we take that and we want to bear power for my glory. And I want to power now becomes a weapon in my hands against my brother. Right? So this is how I think that the Bible is so resourceful. We just have so much there. There's such a richness in the truth, the objective truth of God's word, because it's teaching us about power, that power can be an instrument of good or evil, and it's saying there's actually something behind. The problems we see are behind power. They're prior to power, in a sense. It's not just the power is the problem. There's something behind the power, and that something is sin. Now, how does that help us? How does that help us in this conversation? Well, I think there's so much more solidarity in recognizing sin than there is in just looking at power in abstract. Because the moment we say there's sin, and we understand that sin is in everyone, even if I come to you and I say to you, or you come to me and you say to me, You want to call out my sin. You come in solidarity as a sinner yourself. So what does that do? That immediately establishes common ground. Even in the midst of conflict, we're starting on level ground, because the person making the accusation, and let's assume it's a totally legitimate accusation. The person making the accusation should have the premise, there but for the grace of God go I. In other words, this guy I'm accusing, I could be him. I could be this guy. Tomorrow I could be this guy. If it wasn't for the grace of God, I could be this guy. So immediately there's solidarity in sin, because it's one of those levelers in the scriptures that actually binds us together. In practice, it breaks us apart, of course. But the acknowledgement that we're all suffering from the same disease is something that holds us together. Whereas power, we've just got power. And it's immediately a contest. It immediately sets us apart from each other. And there's no way to breach that if there's no objective truth. All we have is power. And we are always one side or the other side of a power dynamic. And so I think there's a richness in the biblical description. And even if you didn't want to believe anything else in the Bible, you would have more resources if you had the category sin than if you didn't, if you've just got power. So I think that's so much more helpful than just having the power category.
Yeah.
You want to come in there, bro?
No, I would totally agree with you there. And the thing for me is, I know we've been saying this from episode 1, just about how in the gospel, that's the only way we can have the trust that we want to build. We can have the relationships that we want to have as people of different ethnicities. One, first equalizer, we made in the image of God. Secondly, Genesis 3 affects all of us, as you said now. But at the cross of Christ, he redeems us. He doesn't just redeem white people or black people or whatever the case is, but he sees sinners. All of us are sinners, and he redeems all of us to himself. And I think the power of the gospel is that it doesn't, again, trump the individual, So it acknowledges your individual sin. It acknowledges my individual sin. And subsequently it brings then us together into a family. But even then, when we're in a family, the responsibility that the gospel calls doesn't just only call the responsibility on the family together, but it calls the responsibility out of all of us individually. So you had said this off air, just how Jesus goes to the disciples, and calls them one by one individually. And today we refer to them as the disciples, but as we read the accounts in the Gospels, we see how Jesus calls them one by one, and we see their individual stories and what God is doing in bringing them together. So that's the thing for me, where I think when we're fighting for objective truth, and we see that in the gospel compared to the truth that is embodied by a group, and subjective truth, because the one does really trump the individual and all he or she brings, and your own experiences, because if you don't vibe with what the group stands for, then we ostracize, we cast you out, But then again, what you holding on to is not even objective truth itself. So I think you just downplaying yourself, and again shortchanging yourself in that you casting out a lot of beauty that can be embraced. But with the gospel, the thing that connects us and brings all of us together is the truth of who God is, and the thing is with that, I work with teenagers, and they'll always ask, like, if I have sex, will God never, outside of marriage, will God never forgive that, or I heard my friend at school committed suicide. Well, God never forgive that or whatever, And I always remind them of what the unforgivable sin is. The unforgivable sin is you reject this gospel. You reject this objective truth. The fact that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and He dies for all sinners. If you reject that, that's the unforgivable sin. You rejected the Spirit that God has given you. You're a man in the desert and you're thirsty, and here comes God and gives you a glass of water, and you smack that glass out of His hands. You're the one who smacked it. You're the one who's going to remain thirsty. But that's the unforgivable sin, that you're rejecting this one thing that unites all of us. That this one thing that is universally true. For all people, but with our own individual groups, we cannot claim the same power. We cannot claim that it has the same weight as the gospel. Because again, what one group agrees with, even when it comes to race, if you just think of the different dispensations of the different liberals, struggles for liberation, people had different philosophies at different times. So even with that, even where we are now, there's a different philosophy. The people might say, well, the heart is still fighting against racism, and I would agree with you with that. And I'll say, as Christians, we're fighting sin, forever, and we will fight it till we die, and we'll fight it until Jesus returns. So I'll agree with you. We're fighting against what is evil. But the ways at which people attacked it and ways at which people went about it has always been different. Philosophies have always changed, but the gospel doesn't. 2,000 years later, we're still fighting for the same gospel, for the same truth. Christian martyrs who died over the years have died for this one unchanging truth. When I become a Christian, I'm connected with Christians that have lived 2,000 years ago because of this one truth. I have a different culture, I have different experiences, but this one truth never changes. But if with my ethnic group, if I should call it that, there's always culture is dynamic, and so it always changes. And so the values even in there will change, and again, people's individual experiences will change. So I would say, man, the gospel is way powerful. I said it in a couple of previous episodes, and I'll end it here. It's no secret, Biko is my hero. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So I Write What I Like by Biko. Had that book for years, right? And I think 2 weeks ago I got so it's an autobiography. No, it's not an autobiography, but somebody wrote a book just about Biko's life and how people have interacted with him, even after his death, just how they've interacted with his writings. And then I was at a dinner where we were talking about race relations, and at the end of the dinner they gave us books. But you didn't know what book you got, so they basically wrapped it up and they just said pick from the pile and get it. Whatever book you get. I get home, guess whose book it is? Biko. So I'm like, Biko follows me here. You know what I mean? And I've said this over and over in public platforms. He's my hero, But where I depart from him is how he attributes the value of my blackness in and of itself, So my blackness is valuable because I am black, and I would say, I love all that you wrote about. I love all that you stood for, but I disagree there, because what makes my blackness valuable is the image of God. So it's image of God first. That's the equalizer, and secondly, my blackness. So if I have to choose a group that I'm fighting for and standing with, if we're speaking about that group identity, it's the Christians, right? Black, white, Indian, colored, all that ever existed in the past 2,000 years of Christendom. That's who I'm vibing with first and foremost. That's unchangeable. That truth is God's truth. That's objective truth. And yes, I'm black. That's secondary, and that I've seen how, just reading history, how that has expressed itself in different ways, and it's true of all other cultures, So I'm holding on to that Sorry, that was my part.
No, I love that. I love that call to arms there. And I mean, you would say this if we pressed you, but I'm going to say it because you were drawing to an end there. The wonderful thing about that group that you're contending for is that the boundaries are completely porous. In other words, it's come in, you're welcome. And it's not a contest where people are outside are enemies and we're against them. No, the group exists for others. The group at a level exists for those outside. That's where it stands alone, and that's where having Christ at the center of that group is absolutely fundamental, because he stands right at the center of that kind of concentric circle, if you like, but he stands right at the center of humanity because he's the perfect image of God. And so we gather around him. And so we that's why he's saying, I am the truth.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about objective truth. Well, the truth took on flesh and blood. Yeah. And so we gather around him. I mean, I think, that's beautiful, man. I love the way you put that at the end there. I want to drill in, and I want you to come in and then wrap for us a bit more into this. What you were hitting there is one in the many. So in the Bible, that concept of group versus individual, right? How does it play out in the Bible? Because I think that's so important. I think people will push back and they'll say, but in the Bible, the identity is corporate. And it's been that angle has been starved. It's a kingdom. And so I think we want to address that openly. I think that's right. So that is a right correction to perhaps an unhelpful emphasis on individuality in certain branches of Christendom, right? And so we praise God for people who have said, and this is probably why God brings Christians from all over the world to gather around the truth himself, is because we can say to each other, you're not seeing this about Jesus, or you're not seeing that about Jesus and his word. And so that is a massively helpful correction. But I think the pendulum can swing too far. I'm not saying that those who are advocating are, I'm just saying it can. And the question is, what is, when Jesus builds his kingdom, like we were saying earlier, what does he build it with? How does he build it? One soul at a time. He doesn't just zap a group. There were crowds that gathered to him. He doesn't just declare them the kingdom.
Yeah.
He's reaching into people's souls. Read the conversations he has with people. They are, like you were saying, absolutely unique. He goes to the center of who you are as an individual and what your particular idol is. And he speaks into that. And so he doesn't treat us as some amorphous blob we're not pantheists. We're not saved like drops in the ocean who just dissolve into the oneness. That's not the biblical story at all. I mean, he's going and he's calling people by name. And some of them he renames, which is a very personal, individual thing to do.
Sure.
So I think there's a primacy to the individual within the kingdom. Just in the way that the kingdom unfolds. Just thinking about the way Jesus himself deals with group identity. Yeah. He doesn't deal with people as part of a group. I mean, the person who comes to my mind who just shatters that notion entirely is the Samaritan woman, right? So and then on the other end, Nicodemus. So think about it. Yeah. That is a group that's opposed to him, right? Politically opposed to him. But he receives Nicodemus, and in preaching to him about new birth, is offering him new birth.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Samaritan woman at the well. And the text itself highlights the differences. She's a woman.
Sure.
They should have nothing to do with each other. She's Samaritan. They should have nothing to do with Jews. She's a woman of ill repute. He's a rabbi. They should have nothing to do with each other. If he treats her by her group, she's damned to hell. Yeah. If he treats her as an individual, needing grace like every other individual, then she can go back into town and say, come and tell me a man who told me everything I ever did. Come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did.
Sure.
And they do.
Sure.
And it's a story of salvation. So Jesus will not treat people as part of their groups, which is interesting, which is very interesting. I think that carries a lot of weight.
Yeah. Sure.
The fact, so I'll just keep rolling and stop me and jump in. Just thinking about the end. So if we come to the end, the picture of salvation at the end, it's not an amorphous kind of monotone. Used the word monolith earlier.
Yeah.
It's a picture of diversity. It's every tribe and tongue and people and nation gathered around the Lamb. But it's not just diversity at the level of group. It's diversity at the level of individual, because there's a book of life, and our names are written in the book of life. Now, what are we thinking there? Are we thinking that in the book of life there is black Christians?
Sure.
And then there's white Christians.
Yeah.
We're hoping it's not like that. Yeah. We were relating to the Lord in a totally different way. If we're saying that He just relates to us in groups primarily.
Yeah.
I think we have to argue that groups, corporate is certainly there. So let's think about this judgment. We're on the topic of judgment. Apartheid. Is there going to be some sort of corporate judgment? I imagine so. But what is that going to look like? Are we all going to be sort of plugged into one mainframe as if we had one mind, and that single mind is going to be judged? Or somehow one body that will be judged? No, it'll be a gathering of individuals. And would we want those individuals to be judged according to according to their deeds, as the Bible puts it?
Yeah.
We would. We don't want HF of Wood to be put it this way. We don't want the housewife who who was born, I don't know, after 95, and doesn't treat her domestic worker as well as she should, to be judged the same way as HF of Wood. Like we would want HF of Wood to account. We want the housewife to account. That's still a crime. Not as though that's nothing, but surely we want HF of Wood to account. Yeah. And there's a difference. It's like the Nazi Party. Surely we expect more for Hitler than we expect for the most junior cadet in the SS. Surely there's a difference, because we're talking about the God of justice. And so it's not as though, even when we're talking about corporate identity, you cannot lose the individuality within that corporate identity. It's what you were saying about Ubuntu earlier. Yeah. It's not actually Ubuntu if there's no I am. It ceases to be Ubuntu. Yeah. So we can't. It's both and the gospel holds them together. And sure. Just going back to the names, their names in the book of life, right? So the book represents the corporate identity, but the individual names within that book.
Yeah, it's all of life with names in it. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Two last comments, and then I'm done, and you take us home. I think without what do we lose, right? So, and what do we gain? So that was our question. Why does this picture of one and many privilege us as Christians when we approach the question of race? But I think the answer to that is love. Because when there's only group and there's no truth, the only way you can relate to each other is power. But when we're individuals and the call is to love one another, we don't dissolve into groups. You love the other, right? So if we say there's just group, well, you start to wonder what space is there for love? Because I can't,
Love.
there is no other. The only other is another group, and we're at war with them.
Sure.
But I'm just part of a group. I don't have that individual identity. Therefore, I don't have that individual capacity to love another. And the last thing I'd say is what's at stake if we buy into the group thing is the being of God himself. Because we're saying within God there are three persons. Right? So God himself is the basis for our individuality within community. And so those things hold together radically. They hold together radically. And we want to take that resource to the question of race. Because I think it equips us to not treat people on the basis of group. Because when we treat people on the basis of group, all we have to offer them is power.
Power, yeah.
Either this person's against me or they're for me. Because I know what I think about this group. I have my prejudices about this group. Right? I've judged things according to my group story. Here comes a person from another group. My group story tells me how to interact with this person. And so I can't love them. The only way I can relate to them is on the basis of the story. Are they for us or against us?
Sure.
And so I think we want to cling to the gospel, because we are actually taking this problem seriously, this problem of race and racism. And because we take it seriously, we want to cling to the biblical story. Enough from me.
Yeah, bro. I think that's probably the where we land the plane. The only comments I was thinking of making is when you obviously had, spoken now about love, and just how if I'm just obviously within my own group and the enemy is the other group, there's no space for me to love the other. It's what Jesus says. What benefit is there? If you just love your own, what benefit is there? Like even pagans do that. They love their own. So for us, the call is that much greater. I need to look beyond people who just look like me, who think like me, who and I think even just in what we said, we realized that that's not even entirely true. You can be white, but you don't think like all white people. I'm black, I don't think like all black people. And the thing is, we said this at the beginning, the first episode. We're not talking for all black people, we're not talking for all white people. We know that there's obviously things that might cross, I might have experiences that are similar to the majority of black people, but at the end of the day, we would not be honest as well if we would speak for everybody. And that's what we're saying here, there's the space for the individual, the space for the group. They don't have to be at odds, and we can't uplift the other over the one. If we just promote individualism, then we just creating hate and selfishness and self-centeredness. And if we're promoting the group, then again we're fighting for power. And not necessarily love. So I think for me that's a perfect note to end it there, bro. Love, and we see it in the Trinity. We see it in the Godhead, and how he's eternally just existed, and we see the love between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So for me that's a perfect note to end it there. End it on love, man. That's the point.
Love, people. Just love. Okay, see you next week.